I'm going to talk about that first. All the SAROPS misconceptions before we get into it, and then I'll open up the drift and we'll show some of those things. Because when I show the majority of this in MSP2, I get a lot of the, you're telling me I've been doing it wrong my entire career, and I go, yeah, sorry. So, SAROPS misconceptions. Vessel size we just talked about. I already got that, kind of like the, really? For most of you. Yeah, cool. POV radar is the other big one. It was hysterical. CGSAR was big into this whole like, well, we're going to do all this stuff for radar searches and multi-sensor searches and yada, yada, yada. And then they finally rolled it out into a test server, and me and a couple of the guys really just started looking at it, going, okay, what happens if you put 4 people on a boat versus 2 people on a boat versus 1 person on a boat? What's going on? And what we were seeing was that it wasn't just like minor progressions by adding in a couple people. It was this huge algorithmic, like it was major changes by putting 4 people on a cutting cabin for a radar search. And it was this exponential increase, and we couldn't explain why. And so we started going back and asking them, what was this data based off of? If I tell you that I have a person on a raft, and you're telling me that a radar can see it from this distance, how did you get that? And they go, well, we got it from this other cables that were years old. I said, okay, but I'm guessing it's based on the mass of the person, correct? And the radar cross section. And they go, well, yeah. I said, so what if it's a kid? I don't know. Okay, what if they're not standing up on the raft? Was it done with people standing, sitting, lying? How was it done? Don't know. Okay, what if there are 4 people, but some of them are larger, some are smaller? How is any of that going to be affected by the radar sweep? Because it absolutely would affect the radar. And they all went, I don't know. And I went, then why are we defaulting to something that is a significant gain and giving us problems? Because SAROPS doesn't differentiate the probability of success, the p-fail on that object. It doesn't care if it was seen visually or seen by radar. It was seen either way. So by doing this and by saying that something was easily detected by radar, we were inflating the numbers, and that was really the wrong way to go about this. So there's going to be a push. The system will change soon, but for right now, you shouldn't be putting in POV on a radar for the radar. So the object has a little thing that says POV radar. I'll show you that part. And you should just leave it at 0, unless it makes a leeway change, which is only like pangas. Pangas, the more people you put on, the more the leeway changes because it sinks more into the water. But for the majority of boats, putting in 1 or 2 people, you should just leave it at 0, default to 0. And have don't ever touch it. And if you do a radar search, you should be telling it, the system, that you're also doing a visual search, so a visual / radar search. You should be doing both. So all this is going to be coming out. All of this was mentioned in an alt code specifically for this. I'm going to talk to you about sim end time, because I'm finding a lot of people think that their sim end time has to be to the minute on their assets arriving on scene, and that's not true. It's just rounded off to the nearest hour. Pick time, round it off to the nearest hour. You think you need to get exactly what time your assets get on scene? You don't. You can pick an hour after or an hour before or whatever. It's not as exact. When you get into Bravos and Charlies, it does matter. I'm going to show you why that matters. But in Bravos and Charlies, getting that sim in time needs to make sure that it's encompassing all the previous searches. Because we need to review those previous searches, and if we don't do that, then it's going to cause some funky things in the system, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Objects. You should have select up to 4 objects. There was a long time for people pushing onto one object. Well, we know we're looking for a cutting cabin. Really? You know you're looking for a cutting cabin. I'll be impressed how that's supposed to work. So there was a conversation about, well, if I put in more objects, then it drops my particle count on those other objects, and I don't want to do that. It's not true. The system doesn't work that way. Particle counts are basically everything off probabilities. So going from 5,000 of one object to 1,250 of another object, SAROPS doesn't care. It's still looking for a percentage. Percentage doesn't change. I can show you if we want to spend time on it, but just let me explain again. Putting in more objects does not affect the object or the drift of the one object that you really want to focus on. Okay? Weighing objects. Flat out, never use 0. And if you really think that you're a pro at weighing objects and weighing the probabilities of them, I will tell you that I've advocated for years to remove it. You don't need to do it. If I sit down and I do a drift, I'm not touching object probabilities or weight. I'll show you what it does when we get into the POS, because that's really all it does. There's only one time ever that I ever mess with weighing objects, and that's if they're 2 similar objects, and I think that one is more likely than another.
I haven't taken it out then, Chief, based on your recommendation.
Good, yeah, don't touch it. So you're good.
So they have not taken it out?
They haven't taken it out yet. They want to take it out. I've talked about it because it's a carryover from CASP. It's the only reason it exists. It's because CASP had it. And so Jack and I had a big conversation about it, and he originally wanted to take it out, but as soon as I brought up the idea that it's actually kind of helpful for something that's equal probability, he was like, yeah, I might leave it in. I was like, yeah, great. So hopefully they take it out. Adding and weighing scenarios. MSP2, the reason why I'm such a big fan of advocating for it and pushing for it is because in MSP, you were taught the scenario. All of your drifts are the scenario. You're given all the information you're supposed to create the scenario. Stan tests it against the scenario. The problem is that the scenario can be done 6 different ways by 6 different people. But if I have you break down the methodology and you create it into multiple scenarios, you actually can create something that is much more uniform. So I will strongly advocate that if you have a complex case, you should be looking at multiple scenarios. And I'll explain why as we go forward with that. And then weighing scenarios is important. To me, I think you should weigh scenarios. Because you should know which one you think is more likely than another. I talked about the Jupiter Inlet case because it's a perfect case to talk about. 2 boys go into a boat, they go offshore, and they tell their friends they're going to do one thing, and they tell their parents they're going to do something else. 2 scenarios. The second that an or comes out of my mouth, that means they did scenario 1 or they did scenario 2. Okay? But you should also be able to have a conversation between CDO, SMCs, between loved ones, or anybody else you want to believe in, into which one you think is more likely. The second you think that one is more likely, then weigh it higher than the other one. And you should be doing all of that, because that's really where we need to spend our time. I'm going to show you that the probability grid is dynamic, meaning that the probability grid is completely editable, changeable, depending on what you're looking at. This is because if you're walking onto the watch floor, you're going to see times in which a search box is not over the red area, and you're going to go, why aren't we searching the red area? Well, it could easily be that the red area isn't the exact same spot as where what you're looking for is. For instance, if I start looking for a cuddy cabin, and the red is all the other objects, the cuddy cabins won't be in the same spot as, say, PIW and small capsize codes. So telling it to look for the cuddy cabin puts it in a different spot. But the red of everything else might be important to you to tell you maybe we need to go look in that spot as well. But the probability grid changes based off what particles are displayed. So like, let's say that I put in all 4 objects like I did, the upright boat, the swamp boat, the PIW, the debris, all of that. If I have all of them turned on, the probability grid is based on all 4 objects. But if I turn on the particles only for one or the other, then the probability grid will change to only what I was displaying.
When you say turn on, you mean optimize for it?
No, I mean specifically like you can right click and turn on or off those particles. I'll show you when we get into that. So I want to make sure that I go over all of this as I do as I do a walkthrough for you all. We'll get into that as I get into scenarios. I want to go back and forth on this. So I wanted to make sure that you all were clear with some of the things that I wanted to show you. So I'm going to run. So I wanted to talk about this, because this gets brought up a lot, the PIW with PFD, the PIW without PFD. So much so that there's going to be a freaking all coast telling you that it's changing. The naming convention changed. They did that because they realized they screwed up. If you have searched on a PIW with PFD in the last, 10 years, you made the assumption they were wearing a bright orange life jacket with horse collar and retroreflective tape. As soon as I started pushing that out, people everybody went, huh? And I went, yeah. And they went, nobody knows that. So we pushed that out as quick as we could, that that's what's going on. And then you said, okay, well then I would want to use PIW without PFD. Well, the PIW without PFD has a little bit different leeway, but they were identical, believe it or not, in the system for the longest time. They were identical. And so I kept going back to the CGSAR saying, why are these identical? Because if they're average, they should be, I should see a little bit difference between the 2. And so lo and behold, they went back to the math and realized that they needed to update that. So they did, but with PFD is still bright orange retroreflective tape. Without PFD is actually with a life jacket on. It's just that they have like the Walmart special. No orange, no retroreflective tape. Nothing seen above the water. So the standard like ski vest, right? So nothing above the water would be seen. That would be a PIW without PFD. But that's not the same thing to say, but what if I want to drift somebody who legitimately does not have on a life jacket? Oh, well then you should be using PIW scuba. Yeah. You can see the confusion. The reason why you would use the PIW with a scuba suit is because they're saying you're making the assumption then that if they're in the water and they are floating, they would at some point in time float on their back most likely. And if they're, because that's what we found from the majority of survivors, is that people who don't have on life jackets start to move between states. They'll be vertically in the water, they'll also move horizontally in the water. Once they're horizontally in the water, they move a little bit differently. So you really, when you're in a confirmed PIW state, you should be drifting pretty much all of it. PIW with scuba, or PIW scuba, PIW without, PIW with, I'd be drifting all of them because they're all gonna move just a hair differently than each other. So you should be doing that in a confirmed PIW state. And you go, yeah, nobody's doing that. And I go, I know. I've been pushing it for years. They're finally going to attack this in the naming convention. March, I've seen the new drift, the new SAROPS for this. You now are going to have PIW with PFD, and then you can toggle on and off contrast, meaning orange or retroreflective tape. So just have a little button. Turn on or off contrast. So now you have PIW with PFD, and there will no longer be PIW scuba suit, it'll be PIW without PFD. Yay, right? Finally it's gonna make sense that with life jacket, and then orange or not orange. Without life jacket, we'll move like a scuba, but why that's important to you is because you need to understand that that's meaning that they're gonna be moving horizontally on the surface, not vertically on the surface. So again, once I'm in a confirmed PIW state, I'd be putting both, vertical and horizontal.
So in the meantime,
Scuba!
Question on that. So
Go
for
ahead.
the naming convention, are they gonna say, will it say vertical or horizontal?
I don't know if it will.
Because that would
Probably
be,
not. So probably not. But again, for everyone who's curious, you should always check this little help file here. Right here, search objects. This is how I found out that whole thing. PIW with PFD. This category represents persons in the water with PFD or survival suits that have retroreflective tape to improve detection by NVGs. So I'm telling you right off the bat, they have retroreflective tape. And then when you go down to without, it said, persons in the water without orange flotation. And so I had to go back and say, it says without orange flotation, so would that be people who also don't have flotation? And they go, no, just orange flotation. Nobody knows this, and it shouldn't say that. It should say PIW with not orange flotation. That's not how that reads. And without retroreflective tape. So, I mean, even on our ships, I don't know that every cutter I was ever on, I don't know that every single life jacket had retroreflective tape unless we were getting ready to get inspected. You know what I mean? Like, think about it. Like, you all saw those little strips, you're like, that thing's not staying on there. So that's what I mean, like, we didn't know that all this was happening, but it made a huge difference because if you did a search at night in an illuminated search, looking for that retroreflective tape, the sweep width on it was twice what it would be for a swamped boat. I'm gonna show you because it's a huge difference. And so what's happening then is you're going, oh, our POS for the person, they're definitely not out there. We would have seen them. No. You would have seen them if you'd have had a proper illumination, which isn't what you think it is, and if you'd have had retroreflective tape. So this will change in March, but in the meantime, scuba. Okay. And then to prove my point about the whole boats don't really matter for size, I'm going to show you. See how leeway's checked? Nobody really put two and two together. As soon as I picked it, the leeway's checked. As soon as I click on here and I put something in, then this is that whole POB radar right here. I'm going to leave that at 0 for anything. Anchoring probability, you should just stick with 5. But now the detection box is checked. So size was only determining detection. It was never determining leeway. So I'm going to put in all of them just so we can put in some other stuff. It says, oh yeah, we did. So another thing that of note for you all, the swamped capsized boat, I don't really love the fact that it says swamped or capsized because it's really two different things. It says that it's down to 40% of the original size. So what it's doing is it's reducing 60% of it's now below the water. But in a large boat, like if we have like a Grady White, then I would be willing to say, okay, I'm okay with that. Like Grady Whites don't usually disappear off the face of the earth. But what happens, what we've usually seen when they absolutely completely swamp or completely submerge in some ways, usually just the nose will stick out. They'll get a bubble in the nose, right? That's not 40% above the surface. So to me, that doesn't meet the criteria for capsized. Swamp makes sense, but capsized, like, it should be a lot smaller than that. So what I've told people I recommend still is that if you've been doing multiple searches on the size of the swamp boat and it's a small wreck boat, go back and change this. You don't have to keep this as a 20-foot swamp capsized boat. Since this doesn't make a difference, I can call it 8 feet. Right? It says, oh, the maximum allowed height is 1. You go, yeah, that's fine. Leave it there. So now I'm making the assumption that only 1 foot of it's above the water. So even though it's a 20-foot boat, I'm saying that I only wanted a foot of it above the water. I can do stuff like that, and I think that that makes more sense to me. I'm going more conservatively. And stuff like that I can do. And then I'm going to put in my people. So we're going to put in Scuba Steve. And we'll put in a with PFD, just so I can show you the differences here.